Yeah.
You at some point, I love that Israel was mentioned because, of course, in the vegan world, Israel is brought up a lot.
Yeah.
They have a
That's true.
a huge percentage of Israelis are going vegan or thinking about ethical treatment of animals.
Yeah.
At what point did you go vegan? How were you exposed to this way of thinking?
The first time I even really heard about veganism was when I was in Israel. But it was the reason I was there was because my parents worked for the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, Israel. But we lived in Jerusalem.
I was talking about Baha'i last Tuesday. That's so funny. Yeah, last week we were talking to a lady who's doing the Daniel fast, and she's really into religion, and she calls herself a Christian, but she's very, very open, one of those open-minded Christians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, it sounds like you're talking about Baha'i faith, and she didn't know what it was, and yeah, it's so you are you of Baha'i faith? Are you in Baha'i?
Yeah, so I was raised within the Baha'i faith, and lately I haven't been able to be as part of the community because when I lived in Costa Rica, there were only a couple Baha'is in
there's only a couple Baha'is. You don't meet very many. This is why I think
you don't meet a lot, but they're pretty much scattered here, there, and everywhere. Mm-hmm. So usually in any place you go, there's probably a Baha'i, but there's probably not many. And there are some places where you have bigger communities, and I lived in Houston, Texas, and they had a lot of Baha'is where I lived, and it was really wonderful to have that kind of community. And then in Israel, you have the Baha'i World Center, and that's the center of the Baha'i faith, and you have people from all around the world living there. You have it's like an international community, and you get to know people from everywhere in the world, and it's a really beautiful experience. When I was there, I went to high school in Israel, so I was 15 to 18 years old, and I was hanging out with some Baha'is in Haifa, and I met a guy who was vegan. And at the time, this is some time ago. I'm 42 now, and so back then I was probably 17 when I met him, and this is before veganism became as popular as it is today. Yeah. And I remember him talking about it, and I was thinking, you know what, he's making sense, but it's just strange. At the time I thought it was strange, because you didn't meet a lot of vegans at the time.
Well, it was kind of a novel idea for a lot of people. I mean, when I first heard about it, I was like, come on, it was too out of the norm, right? It wasn't even a word I was familiar with.
Yeah, it's true. And this is, what was this, like 1990, what was it, 98? Something like that. Yeah. And so at that time, it did seem a little strange, but at the same time, I couldn't really argue with it, Yeah. So, and then I think ever since that point, veganism has grown in Israel as well. Like in as you're saying, in Tel Aviv, it's one of the most vegan cities with the most options for vegan restaurants. And, I think the reason for that, one of the reasons for that is probably because there's a lot of kosher restaurants throughout Israel. And in a lot of kosher restaurants, you choose meat or dairy, not both.
Right.
And so you might already have lots of vegetarian restaurants just by the nature of the culture. And then it wasn't a huge shift to go from vegetarian to vegan. And so I think that was helpful.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So in 98, you went vegan or
No. So in 98 is when I heard about it.
Yeah, that's about me too. Like Moby and Rizzo were talking about it back in the early like mid 90s. Yeah, I think like the first time I heard about it was with a few stars had been exposed and they were like talking about animal rights. I'm like, what is this? This is the first time I heard the word, and I was like,
yeah. Well, ever since then, I've been, I was dabbling in aspects of it because I always cared about wildlife and I always cared about animals, and I would never kill one myself. If I had a choice between a buffet of all kinds of veggies and fruits and vegan options, and then I saw an animal right there, and someone said, "Hey, you want me to slaughter him?
Right? You want to slit old boy's throat for you so you can?" I mean,
I'd be like, no, obviously not. And I think most people would have the same reaction. I think most people would say, absolutely not. And then you choose all the other options. It's just that everything is behind the scenes. And so people just don't think about it. And the other thing is it's just so cultural that people don't question it because it's just what people do.
Right, exactly. They're going along. It is easier to go along with the flow than it is to, question anything, especially when you see how people are treated, those who question the status quo. They're not generally received very well. I love the idea. Also, I've always thought this, because I've known some people within the Baha'i faith, and sorry to keep going back to that, but I'm excited to talk with someone about it.
Sure, no problem.
Because a lot of Baha'i that I've met have told me that, you know, they're foregoing alcohol, not because of their own health, but because of how much evil is done in the world because of alcohol. So many things bad happen because of alcohol, so they don't want to support that. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like animal agriculture to me. Like, maybe you should stop. It's far worse than anything alcohol's ever done.
No. This and it's true. It's just that, you know, you have Baha'i writings that say avoid certain drugs that can alter the mind. And, you know, because reason is very highly, you know, it's a principle that's really important in the Baha'i faith, is the ability to reason. And if you remove the ability to reason, then we have issues in society. But along with that reasoning is what you're saying is, well, you know, is it reasonable to do what we're doing to animals? And I don't think it is. And, you know, there's also, since you're bringing it up, in the Baha'i writings, Abdul Baha, who was one of the main figures in the Baha'i faith, he has writings about being kind to animals. And, you know, he was from Persia or Iran today. And that's a meat-heavy society, right? And he taught that, you know, not only should we be kind to animals, but we should recognize that it's contradictory to say to be kind to animals and yet eat them. And these are quotes from someone who's living in the early 1900s. And so, you know, he did say that in the future, more and more people would refrain from eating meat. And
he was writing in the 1850s or sometime 19th century?
His father was Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. And then Abdul Baha became the successor to it. So he was the one who basically was the head of the Baha'i community up until his passing. But he traveled to Europe and to the United States in the early 1900s. And while he traveled, he would give talks and presentations. And mostly the Baha'i faith is known for advocating for unity, oneness of humanity. But also within the text of, you know, the faith, you have these writings about being compassionate and kind to animals. And he advocated for actually not eating animals. But because it's so cultural, he didn't make it like a law, you know, because that's the other thing with religion. If you make something a law, before society is ready for it, they typically reject you altogether. You know,
you got to kind of play with. That's why the Catholics took all those pagan holidays. They were like, keep playing that's one of our holidays now. Perfectly legal to keep burning those bonfires around Easter time.
Good point.
Well, that's why they did it, right? They didn't want to be, you know, out of hand dismissed. They wanted to kind of play ball, right? That's how you form a religion. I think that's so important. I often, you know, I don't shy away from talking religion, but it's always one of those things where I feel like I don't want veganism to be a religion, but I feel like veganism has a lot to learn from religion, especially in that community building, in how they're able to have common goals in their approach, and how they have talking points, all the things that they kind of focus. Like they seem to be able to do things better than any social movement, and it's almost a shame that social movements always, I don't know, dismiss religions in a way, you know. There's a lot of, you know, good and bad that can come from religion. Of course. And you know, the good side of it is community. You know, it's one of the good aspects of what religion can do, is it can bring people together and have them work on themselves in a positive way. And it's, you know, there's a benefit to that. And I think with the vegan community, you have, like in any group of people, nothing's perfect, right? You get humans together and they'll find a way to not be perfect. You know, so even within a vegan community, you're going to have people who have different perspectives and beliefs, and that's okay. But it's just a matter of how to coexist within our own group. Well, you know? Exactly. How to agree and how to agree, disagree, and still commit. And I think that is sometimes how a movement needs to move forward. It's one of those things where I often say triangles and tubas, right? We need a tuba and we need a triangle. And if we do that, then we have a symphony. We need all of the instruments to be playing together.
You got it. Yeah.
You can't have the triangle player over there thinking that he's the best thing, and the tuba player, she's thinking that she's got the best instrument. No, they're both important.
Yeah, and
we all need to be playing together.
And unfortunately, the culture of the internet and Facebook and Twitter is controversy, is conflict. And, a lot of people come and they want to fight about something. Yeah. And it's not really all that beneficial to just keep having debates with each other when we need to be looking at the bigger picture.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.